Hi, my name is Stephanie Downs with the FiXiT Foundation, and I'd like to tell you about the cutting-edge programs we are working on to finally bring an end to pet overpopulation. Currently, we euthanize approximately 4.2 million cats and dogs in our shelters every year. That's 12,000 a day and 500 every hour. Although those numbers are horrible, it's actually significantly better than it was prior to the introduction of low-cost spay and neuter programs in the early 1970s. And as you can see, over a period of approximately 25 years, they were able to bring us from 25 million animals dying in our shelters every year down to approximately 5 million. The bad news, though, is that that number plateaued approximately 15 years ago and has stayed fairly steady at a 4 to 5 million range over this period. It is estimated that approximately 25% of the U.S. population continues to refuse to spay and neuter their animals, although low-cost options are available. So what we need to do is figure out how do we get to that final 25%. That's the key to solving the problem, and that's where FiXiT is focused. Also, we spend, as taxpayers, approximately $2 billion per year to round up, house, feed, and ultimately euthanize half of the animals that are brought into our shelter system. So I'll talk about this more later, but we feel like there's a much better way to do that, to start getting out in front of the problem instead of continuing to treat the symptom. So we are focused on bringing an end to pet overpopulation by increasing interest in and access to spay and neuter programs. And we are doing this through two revolutionary programs. One is a case study called The Final Fix, focused on identifying how to increase interest in spay and neuter programs in a controlled environment. In this test, we are looking at what's the tipping point. What is it going to take to get people interested? Is the issue as to why they're not spaying and neutering financial? Is it just that low cost, even though not a significant amount of money, is still outside of their reach? Or is it because they are constantly running from one job to the next and barely able to hold it together? Or is the issue transportation? We have come across many people who don't have the means to get their animals to a spay and neuter clinic. And another hurdle that we encounter are cultural or religious beliefs. Some people feel it is unnatural to spay and neuter or have grown up believing various myths we need to overcome. So the idea was to find an environment where we could test marketing messages and incentives with a group of people that closely match the target audience of that final 25% in the United States that aren't participating in low-cost programs. After many years of looking at various environments and analyzing what would be the ideal situation, we've selected the island of St. Croix, which is in the U.S. Virgin Islands. There are many reasons we selected this island. Being an island, it's a controlled environment, which enables us to do a test with borders. Another reason is that it's a U.S. territory. So if we would like to use the data we gather for legislation down the road, it is important that it be gathered on U.S. soil. Also, the island is a perfect size. An island such as Puerto Rico was too large, whereas one like St. John was too small. St. Croix has 53,000 people, which is perfect. Also, they have very limited communication channels on the island. One newspaper, limited radio and television, so this way we can easily reach everyone with our message and know that we've reached them. Also, the residents' demographic matched on income and education levels to the segments of the population in the United States that make up that final 25% we need to reach. Not only was the island environment ideal, but the animal welfare environment was also ideal. St. Croix euthanizes over 4 times the amount of animals than the U.S. average per capita. Also, low cost has been available for over a decade, so the message has been there and people have not acted on it. They also have a supportive veterinary community, which is crucial, and most importantly, it is centrally managed. They have one animal shelter on island, which has been tracking their data for a number of years. This is going to be very helpful in tracking our results. This is the St. Croix Animal Shelter. They have a very dedicated staff, which has the heartbreaking job of handling approximately 3,600 animals every year, 80% of which have to be put down because there aren't enough homes for them. Our research on island is made up of various phases. We have already completed a couple phases of this multi-year project. Phase 1, which was completed last year, was to do a perception analysis on people's opinion of spay and neuter, if they had or hadn't done it, and why or why not. We surveyed approximately 2% of the island and identified that 38% of the people have pets, which is helpful for us to understand the magnitude of the number of animals on island. Another key point we gathered was that a significant amount of the population are dog owners, 78%, and this is consistent with the shelter's intake numbers, so we know we need to focus on canines in our marketing messages. We also found that approximately 65% had not fixed some, if not all, of their animals. This is almost 3 times higher than the U.S. average, so a very good environment for us to do a test. The reasons we found that people were not spaying or neutering were all over the board, but we see many that can be addressed and tested against. For example, expense. If expense is the problem, that's something we can test by lowering the price or making it free. Other ones were haven't bothered, scheduling issues, indoor and unnecessary. Those are barriers we can overcome by trying different marketing message or just adjusting the process. Also, as part of our survey, we asked people if they were aware of the current low-cost spay and neuter program and would they use it. When asked that question of people that had unaltered animals, 30% said yes and 70% said no. But when we moved on to the question of would you do it if it was free, 69% said yes and only 31% said no. That's a significant difference between those two incentive levels. This is an opportunity that we need to embrace. We also found, to our surprise and excitement, that a significant amount of the island is connected via social networking channels. So as part of the test, we are also going to be utilizing new channels that, as far as we are aware, have never been used to promote spay and neuter. We want to identify how to use these channels so that we can teach other groups how to do it. The second phase of our research was to complete an island-wide animal census. To do this properly, we selected 5 random areas on the island and drove these every morning at dawn and every evening at dusk for 6 weeks to count animals. We will be conducting this study at the same time every year to analyze the impact we are having. The third phase was to do message testing. We did focus group research to analyze what messages would be impactful to people. We utilized 2 sources of data in developing messages to test. First, we used our perception analysis that we had done earlier in the year. Also, we formed a local advisory committee of people who had grown up on St. Croix. We needed their help getting into the heads of our target audience. Through this work, we came up with 6 different categories of messages to test. These are a few examples of some of the posters we put together to test. The first message that we focused on was the expense message, trying to get across to people that it's not as expensive as they might think. We also wanted to test out messages about the number of animals dying, but in a more aggressive way than had been done before. So we were more in their face about the numbers of animals that are actually dying. Another message we thought would be important to test was the guard dog message, which is something we found on island that a lot of people consider their animals to be guard dogs. We wanted to get the message out that a fixed dog is less likely to wander. We also wanted to try something different and focus on messages, what's in it for them. On St. Croix, you often see packs of stray dogs running, and many children are admitted to the emergency room for dog bites, so we wanted to try various public safety messages. We were told by the local advisory committee that often people call the shelter after their female dog has puppies and say, "I didn't know she was going to end up having drooping nipples like that. I don't want her anymore." So we wanted to try some female-specific messages. The final message was family extension. Many people view their pets as status symbols, and there are very strong family ties in their culture. We wanted to make them think, do you know what happened to your puppy's puppies? And get them to think of those animals as an extension of their family. As part of the focus group analysis, we also asked people what single message they thought would convince people the most. And to our surprise, the overwhelming winner was overpopulation. They have been implementing humane education in the school systems on St. Croix for a number of years, so it was great to see that message stuck. So we wanted to at least put that in there and test those results. We tested over 20 messages and designs with the intention of narrowing down to the top 5 performers. The one that performed the best was a public safety message about children being bit by dogs. And also the Homes for Puppies message played very well. I'd like to point out a few things that we learned, which you will see across the final design. When we asked people if they had pets, 9 times out of 10 they would say no, because to them pets are animals inside the house. Most of their animals live outside. But if we asked, do you have a cat or dog, they would normally say yes. This told us we needed to stay away from the word pet in our messaging. You'll also notice on the posters it says, "Get your dogs cut." Most people were not familiar with the terminology of spay and neuter, and even fix was sometimes a stretch. But many people would call it cut, so we decided to weave that into our testing. The extension of the family poster also scored very well, as did the female issue of the drooping. And based on the strong response to the message overpopulation, we added a 5th design for our live testing. We are already in live production, and this is how the process works. We are promoting the spay and neuter program. We are also handling all the incoming calls so we can track all the numbers and appointments that are booked. Then the clinics on island perform the surgeries, and over time we track the results and continue to refine the marketing. We are utilizing various marketing channels to promote the program, both traditional and new techniques. We're taking those 5 marketing messages that tested the best and applying them across all of these channels. And we're using tracking phone numbers for everything. So for example, on our posters, you might have noticed the different phone numbers. So if we put out 5 posters, we have 5 different tracking numbers. When we put out vehicle signs or newspaper ads with those same messages, they'll have different tracking numbers because we want to track not only the message, but also the channel. We are also using new channels not tried before, such as Facebook ads, text messaging, lawn signs, and more. We'll be able to analyze the messages that get people to take action and the channels that perform best. I'd like to show you some of the data we have gathered to date. First of all, we're finding one of our experimental channels, yard signs, is pulling the strongest, followed by newspaper, radio, and promotional cards, which are business card-sized pieces we give to animal control, hand out at events, etc. One channel you don't see here, which I mentioned being excited about trying out, is Facebook, because it performed so poorly. The traffic we received on the ads we placed was enormous, but since we were using tracking phone numbers, we were able to identify that it resulted in very few calls and quickly eliminated that expense. Had we not been tracking, we could have easily assumed a majority of our calls were coming from this channel. But we can't just look at the channels. We have to also analyze the cost per lead, because we're not spending money evenly across those channels. For example, newspaper is pulling almost as strongly as yard signs, but the cost per lead via newspaper ads is significantly higher. Although the posters or promo cards are not pulling in as many calls, the cost per lead via these channels is very low, as they are cheap to print and distribute. Here's an example of a lawn sign, which again is pulling the best, especially based on cost. And the beauty is that every month the cost per lead continues to decrease, as these last a very long time, whereas something like radio you have to continue to pay for on a monthly basis to maintain the call volume. We were also able to track the response by message. Overpopulation messages pulled the best, closely followed by the "get your girl cut or she'll have drooping nipples" message, one we could have never identified if not for the advisory committee and testing methodology. The final phase of our test in this controlled environment was to do incentive testing in combination with the marketing messages. We started at a baseline price of $25, which is the cost that residents are accustomed to, so we can see how new messaging applied to standard pricing affects interest. The next level continued charging a small fee at $25, but also providing $25 in gifts, such as bags of dog food, leashes, etc. We wanted to see if this would create a perception it was free and increase demand. The third phase was offering the surgery for free, and the fourth phase was offering it free plus an incentive. At this point, we were essentially bribing them, but it enabled us to tap into groups that were most resistant and opened up entirely new channels. We tried various incentives, such as meal deals, which caused a big increase in young males with male dogs coming in, which is a hard group to reach. And our most interesting was a free fix and a free bottle of rum, which caused people to bring in multiple pets, strays, and even their friends and family's pets. It worked exactly as we hoped it would. We are also gathering data when people call and check in for appointments about the guardians and the pet. We were pleasantly surprised to see a significant interest in older generations, as we were anticipating they would be harder to win over. We have also seen an increase in interest from younger males as we offered incentives such as free surgery plus gifts. Dogs were the most prevalent clients, which is not surprising considering our marketing was very focused on the dog overpopulation issue, which is a big concern in St. Croix. And we saw a big jump in male dogs when we went to free plus a gift offer. And we are excited to report that within 18 months, we had increased the demand for surgeries by 10 times of the demand that they had before. When we arrived on island, they were selling approximately 5 vouchers per week for surgeries, and we are now consistently doing 50 surgeries per week and are hoping to be taking that higher by bringing in some additional vet resources. And even more exciting, we have recently learned as of July 2013 that this year's intake from 2012 to 2013 is down 25% compared to last year at this time. So as you can see, between 2011 and 2012, we had stabilized the population. And then between 2012 and 2013, we've seen a significant decrease. If this trend continues, we should be able to end overpopulation on the island of St. Croix within another 2 years. If we do this, we will have ended overpopulation within a 5-year time frame in an environment that had an extremely high overpopulation problem. The final FiXiT project has 2 very specific goals. First, we want to knock out overpopulation on St. Croix and use this study to fight for larger change. We have already proven that there is a significant increase in demand if spay-neuter is offered for free, which is data we can use to fight for government funding in free clinics, possibly funding for marketing, and funding for incentives. Now that we have them to high volume, we need to continue at this pace and analyze how long it takes to knock out overpopulation. Our second goal is to take what we are learning and develop a methodology to train other animal communities, shelters, and clinics to implement in their environment. We realize a marketing message about drooping nipples might not play in, let's say, Detroit, but the methodology of how we identified that message can be used in any environment. We documented every step so we can teach others how to survey their communities, develop messages, test those messages in focus groups, and track to refine how they're spending their money and target in the right areas. By training clinics nationwide to better target, we can help them decrease spending while increasing demand. As I mentioned earlier, as taxpayers, we currently pay approximately $2 billion per year to round up, house, feed, and attempt to adopt 8 million animals. Only half of those animals are adopted, and half of them are put down. We believe by better focusing funding, such as implementing spay and neuter programs that are easily accessible, that we will be able to get to the root of the problem instead of treating the symptom. This brings me back to our mission, the second half of which is to make sure spay and neuter programs are easily accessible to any family which wishes to do so. In supporting this mission, we have launched the Get Your Fix project. This is available at getyourfix.org. On the site, we connect families who are in need of spaying or neutering their animals but have fallen on hard times with donors who want to have a direct impact on ending pet overpopulation. Many of the stories are from families that have taken in a stray or abused animal. We also have people who are trying to fix feral cats in their community to help control the population. Here is an example pet profile. Donors can see the area where the animal lives, can learn their name and hear their story, and they can choose to fund their fix. Visitors can also share their story through various social networking channels. So thank you for taking the time to hear about our solution-based programs that are finally going to bring an end to pet overpopulation. Now we need your help. First, please help us spread the word. Post this video link on your Facebook page and email it to your contacts, especially anyone you know that has a big spot in their heart for animals. And we would greatly appreciate any donation you can make to enable us to continue our valuable work. Below are links to learn more about us and support our work. Thank you.